The University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana is one of the top public research universities in the nation. It's also the flagship campus of the University of Illinois system. We have many very strong graduate and undergraduate programs on campus. We have about 70 undergraduates who declared the geology major. We have about 35 graduate students. Geology is a very diverse scientific discipline. We work on everything from the very surface of the Earth all the way down to the Earth's core. So, for example, we have seismology that looks into the interior of the Earth using seismic waves. We have a lot of high-tech techniques that we use to look into the Earth and to try to understand processes that are going on inside the Earth that give us volcanoes and earthquakes and groundwater, water resources, oil and gas, and minerals. Currently, job opportunities in geology are extremely good. We have a lot of jobs right now in the oil and gas industry. We also have jobs in the public sector in government. We also have a number of students that go off to work in the environmental industry in environmental consulting. Finally, we have a number of our students go on to academic university teaching.
Our group at Illinois in sedimentary processes and earth surface dynamics is essentially looking at the modern to interpret the ancient. And what we're trying to do is look at modern processes to interpret ancient sedimentary rocks. And we're doing this on a range of spatial scales, from millimeters through to many tens of kilometers, and temporal scales through from milliseconds through to tens, if not hundreds of millions of years. One example of this research at the moment is looking at the dynamics of sedimentary bed forms, sand dune. Look at how they form and look at what their preserved product is. So what we're doing is trying to combine both laboratory work with theory and field work to try and investigate how the Earth's surface is sculpted and how that's represented in the rock record. A lot of our work has applications within the exploration of resources, and that can be both oil, gas, water, but it can be other minerals such as sand, gravel, limestones that are essential for many economies.
We are trying to figure out the nature of the origin of silicic igneous rocks, granites and rhyolites on Earth. Our research is fairly unique in that we combine a high temperature, high pressure experimental laboratory with an isotopic measurements laboratory where we work on real field samples. We're working in Cordillera del Paine. It's an intrusion in southern Chile, and there you have about a mile of intrusion that's been exposed by recent glaciation. I feel that having broad knowledge of the field of geology brings on a real advantage to problem solving. And it's in this mindset that I hope my students will work from both the experimental lab perspective and also the field perspective. And it really goes both ways, this integration of the two areas.
Corals are really dynamic and important systems on planet Earth. They house a lot of genetic diversity on the planet. They're also key parts of the oceanic ecosystem. Over the years, what I've been interested in doing is being able to understand how corals create their skeleton. We call that biomineralization, because the skeleton actually records a history of the environment in which the corals have lived. Our ability to read the rock record, which in this case is limestone that contains coral skeletons, has been an important ongoing attribute of geology for many decades. So my question was, what is there in terms of the relationship between a warming planet and bacteria in seawater and the genesis of coral skeletons? What is there in that package that can help us understand coral disease, both in the modern environment and the ancient? And so what I've been interested in doing is bringing fully the molecular tools of DNA, RNA, protein, and other molecule analysis, bringing those parts of biology directly into geology. Students who want to be involved in this have to be physically fit. They need to be scuba certified, which is totally doable by anyone who can swim. Another aspect of this is we do need people on the land that help us not necessarily get into the water and do the research, but there are also fossilized equivalents, and that involves hiking up into the mountains and collecting ancient samples of the old coral reefs that are kind of comprising the old limestones of the islands.
My research has a lot of potential practical applications. In my research, I use isotopes to identify both sources and to identify processes in the environment. So this can be used in different environmental monitoring and remediation studies. The Department of Geology has been a great place for me to study because here there's a lot of ongoing research that complements my own, if you will. And as a result, we can all work on individual projects, but really come together to answer larger research questions.
Students, former 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 students, former